What is up guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a chill session where we are actually going to be focusing on the dual avatar archetype. Of course this will be the debut of this particular archetype on this channel, so with that being said we are going to be going through every single one of these cards and essentially trying to get an idea of how this deck could actually be built. Because when you actually look at this particular deck from a perspective where you're completely ignorant of what this deck can do, all you see is that the deck revolves around two particular monsters, dual avatar fist Yuhi and dual avatar feet Kokoko. So because of that, it makes you wonder, how does this deck even work out? I mean, can you just splash the whole deck up with hand traps? Well, we're about to find out, but before we get started, let me remind you guys to consider subscribing and also drop a like, share, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Without further ado, let's begin. So firstly we have over here the two monsters. I think it's definitely a necessary thing for us to focus on the two of them and why they are the way they are. So we basically have here the fists and the feet. I mean, it's really as simple as that. There are no other main deck monsters and it seems to be working around that way where they go into their particular fusions. You might be able to tell based on their artwork or maybe their fusion materials, which are more akin to how they look. And then of course you have some supporting spells and traps. Now you guys might have actually noticed I am missing one particular spell card, and that is Dual Avatar Invitation. It is meant to be a secret rare, which is not too expensive fortunately. It's about $3 or $4 each, but nevertheless it is a very difficult card to find, so even though it is affordable, I can barely find it anywhere, and because of that I just have to proxy it in for the time being. However, this is a deck that I've had for quite a while now, or at least this particular core, and unfortunately I just never paid attention to it. It was always just sitting in my drawer while I was working on other decks. It goes to show you how many decks I actually own, and it goes to show how much time I actually have to divert into each of my decks. But that's the thing, I mean, if you have so many decks, there's really nothing you could do about it. But one day it just started to catch my attention and I figured I wanted to actually build this. It seemed like there was very minimal amounts of cards there, so this wouldn't be too much of an issue to obtain all the cards. In fact, I'm only missing one, so with that being said, it shouldn't be too bad. And I'm just hoping that for the rest of the cards to fill up the deck, it doesn't cost, or at least it doesn't require me to go out searching too much. Perhaps I have everything I need to actually build these decks. But of course, let's now talk about each of these monsters and their effects and move on with each of these cards as we go along. So firstly we have over here the Yuhi. So you could essentially just target a dual avatar monster you control to destroy, and if you do, you can add a dual avatar spell from your deck to your hand. Of course that's really amazing, but it really works out well when you start off with Dual Avatar Invitation. And I think Dual Avatar Invitation is something that we might have to go through first. Now I will just put a picture of the card on the screen itself right over here so you guys can actually see. And it's essentially a card that allows you to generate tokens. I think that's the main takeaway from that card. But I guess the secondary effect also allows you to go for 2 fusion summons, I guess in that same turn, so it is definitely nice without you having to go for a polymerization spell card. Now, because of Invitation's first effect to generate your tokens, they are considered dual avatar monsters, so it pretty much triggers off the Yuhi to be able to just destroy one of those tokens and of course search out one of your spells or traps. This of course makes the deck very efficient and pretty much just a consistent deck where you pretty much won't fail as long as you draw into both an Invitation as well as the Yuhi or the Kokoko. Now that's just the first effect, allowing you to search out your spells and traps. Absolutely amazing of course, but its second effect is if your dual avatar fusion monsters ever gets destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can actually just add this card straight up from your graveyard to your hand. Really amazing. It just generates you material, allowing you to recycle resources. So you could see why it just revolves between these two particular cards, because even if your fusions are destroyed, you just return these back to your hand and repeat. But of course with Kokoku's effect, it's if this card is actually summoned either by normal or special, you just get to add a dual avatar trap directly from your deck to your hand. And yes, I did kind of make a mistake there with the Yuhi, it only adds spell cards, but Kokoku actually adds your trap cards. Now, for Kokoku's effect, or at least its secondary effect, if one of your dual avatar monsters is destroyed by a card effect or battle, you just get to special summon this card out on the board, which will essentially trigger off the first effect. Absolutely amazing, of course. So as you can see, we already generated a 3-card combo where you have Invitation, you have Yuhi, and you have Kokoku, and in the end you end up generating so many extra bonuses out of that, where you get to search out 1 spell and 1 trap, given both of these will be summoned out as long as you have Invitation in your hand. Now what's amazing is that on summon from that particular effect, you could then apply a particular effect afterwards where you get to destroy 1 dual avatar monster. In this case, it could just be one of the tokens you generated out of your Invitation, and you essentially just get to fusion summon, well not fusion summon, you get to special summon a dual avatar fusion monster from your extra deck, which is very powerful of course because some of these fusion monsters require a lot of materials, so to just special summon it out like that really quickly is amazing. Of course it's not considered a proper fusion summon, so you wouldn't be able to revive it back from the grave if you needed to when it got destroyed, but nevertheless it doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that you're bringing out a fusion monster with great ease using just a simple effect like so. Now as you can see, both effects quite amazing, generating you a big monster right off the bat and of course searching your deck. But of course we now have to consider, what did the spells and traps do? Well, aside from Invitation, which we already went over, what makes them so good in this particular deck? So let's move aside these 2 cards and now let's move on to our spells and traps. So let's start off here with these spell cards. We already went over Invitation, so that's great, but now let's talk about the other ones as well. Now for dual avatar defeating evil, you essentially get to pop one of your cards as well as one of your opponent's cards. It's not necessarily the best, but I guess if it triggers off your Kokoku's effect to special summon itself out, then there's no big deal with that, right? Also, this is a quick play, so you can activate it whenever you actually need to, meaning you could potentially go for some shenanigans with the Kokoku even during your opponent's turn. It's quite amazing actually, and if one of your monsters destroyed happened to be one of your fusion monsters, you can apply either one of these 2 effects. Either you draw a card or you banish one of your opponent's cards in their graveyard, which is just an added bonus, but it's the main fact that it is a quick play, allowing you to pull some different shenanigans, as I said, from your opponent's turn, so that's definitely a great advantage you actually have there. But of course we also have over here Perfect Synced Aoun or Aoun, definitely interesting naming of course, but with that being said, this here is a super rare card and it happens to be a field spell. So when this card actually gets activated, you simply just get to add a dual avatar monster directly from your deck to your hand. So again, a really amazing starter, or at least a really amazing opening card, and that pretty much just gets you your monsters, which technically it's like you're playing 9 monsters in the deck, because as long as you draw into this, you don't need to draw into your other monsters. You just need to draw into this, search out your monsters, and it's nice. It's kind of like a pseudo reinforcement of the army, or something of a similar kind. But of course there are additional effects given that this is a field spell. So if you control a dual avatar effect monster, you can special summon 1 dual avatar spirit token, which is similar to Invitation of course, but just not as great as Invitation, since Invitation can actually summon out more than 1. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this term except fusion monsters. That's the same restriction as the Invitation anyway, so even though you could pull off all these amazing combos, there is a bit of a restriction towards you actually only being allowed to summon out your fusions, so we better hope that the fusions are actually really good. And of course these are once per turn effects, so with that being said, I do think that so far everything is just really good with this particular archetype. For the majority's sake, you might even be playing 3 copies of almost everything. Maybe with the exception of defeating Evil, I might play 2 copies of it. But you can see here that the deck is such a consistent deck, it flows really well, and honestly, I'm seeing that the rest of the monsters in the deck just need to be a bunch of hand traps, and you're actually doing really well with this particular deck. All you need to do is disrupt and slow down your opponent, and you could just work your magic the next turn, or either on your first turn. However, let's move the spells aside and the monsters, of course, and let's finally move on to the 3 different trap cards. So we have here Ascendance, we have here Compact, and we have Return. Now, Ascendance was the one that came out in Blazing Vortex, whereas these 2 originally debuted in Phantom Rage, which came first, of course. So for Dual Avatar Return, it's quite amazing really. You could target one of your dual avatars in your grave and special summon it, and if it happens to be a lower than level 4, which means if it's just not one of your fusions, then you essentially just get a bonus token out of it, which is very nice, of course. But aside from that, it doesn't do too much. It just generates more material to potentially allow you to go into your fusion summons. As for Dual Avatar Compact, during your main phase, you just get to banish one of your dual avatar spell traps from your graveyard, which I guess it doesn't really matter whether or not you have them in the graveyard or not, because they only have field effects anyway. But what's amazing is this particular effect becomes that spell trap's effect when this card is actually activated, and that makes it so powerful because it's like having more or extra copies of these spells and traps. And you have to keep in mind that for certain spells and traps, they're really good cards. So to have this, I'm already thinking, well, if you want to speed this card up, you could play Trap Trick, because these are all normal traps, but this here is the most amazing of all, given that it could just become any of these other traps here. So you could play Trap Trick if you didn't draw into any of these, and set Trap Trick down, and of course you could play Foolish Burial Goods, ditching off one of the ones that you plan on activating to pull up some crazy shenanigans by ditching off to the graveyard. So I'm already starting to visualize so much with this deck, playing Foolish Burial Goods, playing Trap Trick, playing a bunch of hand traps. The deck is filling up really quickly, and I've only gone through just a few of these cards. But of course, here is Ascendance, so you could essentially target one of your dual avatars, destroy it, and that can of course include your token, and then you could special summon a dual avatar monster from your deck or extra deck, whose original level is 1 higher or 1 lower than that monster that had on the field. So in this case, the one you would have here is obviously the yugioh, being a level 5. It's the lowest one, so it does give you some kind of option, but of course that can include either of your fusions as well. So you could fusion Climb, which is pretty amazing here. It's a nice added concept to the deck already that revolves to such a unique playstyle. Now during your main phase, except the turn it was actually just sent to the graveyard, which is fine, of course, it's okay as a restriction. You can just banish this card from your graveyard and then target one of your dual avatars, get it back to your hand, which is great of course because it's again another form of recycling your resources. However, that's pretty much it for the trap cards, so just going to move them all aside. We can see that there's no bad cards in this particular deck. Every card so far has been really amazing, but let's now go on with the trap or the fusion monsters. So I'm going to start off with the weaker ones first because I guess they came out first. So here we are, and as you see, it pretty much resembles Yuhi, and of course this one resembles the Kokoku. Now these two ones are the weaker ones, only requiring 2 dual avatar monsters. It's generic enough that you can just use your tokens as materials, whereas these ones will require their specific dual avatar monsters, but we'll get to them later. These ones are the weaker ones. Let's begin. So for our yugioh, which is the level 5, if your dual avatar fusion monsters would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you could just destroy one dual avatar monster you control instead. So kind of like diverting yourself away, again allowing you to potentially pull up some different shenanigery. And during the main phase, if you actually control dual avatar fusion monster, that was fusion summoned using an effect monster, which means just not your token of course. As a quick effect, you could then target one face up monster, special summon from the extra deck, negate its effects until the end of this turn. I don't like that it targets, but you know what, it's still okay. It is a level 5 monster only after all, so you don't really expect too much out of it. I see myself maybe playing 2 copies of this, because on some turns you might want to play link monsters as an alternative instead, though for the majority's sake a lot of your cards will be restricting you to just these, so you might be able to fit in 3 copies of this if you really needed to. Now as for Armored Argio's effect, if this card is special summoned, you could target one attack position monster your opponent controls, destroy it, and also you can't attack directly for the rest of this turn. Now while you control a dual avatar fusion monster that was fusion summoned using an effect monster as material, all dual avatars you control just gain 300 attack and defense. So as you can see, these 2 weaker ones don't really do too much. This one gives a bit of a boost, and this one just pretty much negates something, but it targets, which is kind of a downgrade from what you might expect from monsters coming out in this particular era. But nevertheless, they are easy to go into, and most of the time you just use their effects on their own, and you just use your other cards like your spells and traps I mentioned earlier to get rid of these, to kind of benefit off your different shenanigans. So let's move these to a side now, and let's finally move on to the 2 big boss monsters. These are the ones where we actually have high expectations for. So let's start off here now with the Mitsujaku. This one obviously requires the Kokoku plus 2 other dual avatar monsters. That's pretty insane. It requires a lot. Obviously you bring out your tokens with the invitation, it's no big deal, but you can see how difficult it is to bring out, hence why certain cards might allow you to just special summon these much easily without the whole process of fusing the materials. So for its effect, the first time each of your dual avatar fusion monsters you control would be destroyed by battle each turn, it's not destroyed, which I kind of expect of course that they do have some kind of invulnerability. However, once per turn during your main phase, you can return all spells and traps your opponent controls to their hand. I kind of like that. It does remind me a bit of the Shino birds, being able to just bounce back or at least return their spells and traps. So in this case, this one's more so an activated one whenever you need to, whereas the Shino birds do it on summon. Now when a monster effect is activated on your opponent's field, while you control 2 or more fusion monsters, as a quick effect, you can destroy that monster. I did wish that we could negate it, but I guess that's no big deal there. We could easily fill up the deck with a bunch of negation cards. But the fact that you could chain and pop those cards anyway, I guess that's not too bad of a particular effect. It allows the monster effect to go through, but you at least destroy it, preventing some kind of material gain out of that. But with that being said, let's put this aside and talk about our final card here, being the Yugioh. So this one will require your dual avatar fist Yuhi plus 2 dual avatar monsters. Pretty crazy of course. Now if this card battles, your opponent can't activate anything, so that's pretty much like an ancient gear golem, but in this case it's mainly during the damage step, which is still fine of course. Now if this card attacks and after damage calculation, you can return 1 monster your opponent controls to their hand. Very nice of course. When your opponent's spell trap or effect is activated that targets a card on the field while you control 2 or more fusion monsters, as a quick effect, you can negate that activation. Now it is nice that at least you can negate it, but the spells and traps, as you can see, it has to target something, so any of the AoE effects will not particularly be any use for this effect here, so that's unfortunate. Overall, I would have to say that the fusion monsters are a little bit more underwhelming than I thought, because we are kind of relying on the fusion monsters the most. Since we're being restricted by the deck itself, you kind of was hoping that there was a bit more to it, but nevertheless the main deck isn't filled up too much, so we can easily have plenty of room to fit in hand traps, to fit in cards to extend and push this further. They're warriors, so you could just add a reinforcement of the army. You could just do quite a lot of things with this particular deck. It has potential to go beyond. We just have to wait for a few more cards to be released, and of course I'm still going to proxy in the invitations, so don't worry about that. I will try to push what this current archetype can do to its fullest potential. But with that being said, I would like to hear your opinions on what you think about this deck. Do you actually think this deck could be a lot better? Can it already be better right now? Let me know your suggestions as to what I should actually add into this deck. With that being said, this chill session has definitely gone on very long now. It should be about like over 20 minutes, so I'm gonna have to end it here. But this was really fun going over this. I'm going to definitely enjoy building this. The next video should be the deck profile, but we'll see about that. However, thanks for joining me today. I hope you all have a sensational day. I'll see you all next time.